Hi, this is Dave Meshkov from Knopman Marks, and I'm here with my colleague Howard Kaplan. I'm going to ask him some questions about the Series 24, and hopefully we can share some insight that might help you as you're preparing. So Howard, you've trained thousands of people for this principal level exam. What do you think is one of the biggest takeaways that somebody going into the exam should be thinking about?
Well, I think, first of all, the exam is written in such a way that the regulators kind of take it for granted that you know your stuff, and they really want to cut to the deepest level of some of these rules and really require you to really understand or be able to flesh out nuances between what is the best answer and what would be the next best answer, which could be almost as good as the first one. So I think people really have to be prepared to make almost judgment calls, like, do I want this or do I want that? One of them is right, but just can't quite nail it down with as much confidence as you'd like to.
Yeah, is it the case that people should study for these in the same way that they studied for their Series 7 years ago, or maybe their Series 79 when they just were entering the business?
You know, if anything, I think the challenges people face today with the 24 is that they're so pressed for time, and that even if they recognize that it's going to be a tough exam, they may not always necessarily give it the actual sheer number of hours that they need to. So you've got to read your textbook, you have to do all your practice questions, and you have to participate in some type of training or tutoring. And the heart may be willing, but sometimes you just don't have the sheer number of hours to do it. And whether you get an easy test or a difficult exam, not appreciating that you have to put in those hours, that could be the biggest detriment to your success on this test.
How many hours you think on average does the passing candidate put in?
I think the passing candidate probably puts in somewhere between 80 and 100 total hours, sometimes even more. Because I think at some point in time, our good friend paranoia starts to creep in, that even when you put in so many hours, your practice scores are not really showing that. But I think at the end of the day, you've got people that have put in a solid 80, 90, 100, or even more hours. I've had friends that have studied for this exam for a couple of months, off and on, because they want to be sure the stakes are so high, they will do anything they need to pass. So just turn off the clock and run with it. But yeah, you're looking at a major study commitment, Dave, no matter what.
Yeah. In my experience training people, it's, you have to commit and do it once and do it right.
Agreed.
If you don't put in that full effort, we regularly see students coming up just short, and that's always frustrating for everybody.
Sure.
You gotta really be invested.
Right.
Now, some of the questions on the exam we've heard are really quite nuanced and quite detailed. Are there some things that come to mind as you think about your learning and reading and getting into the rules that stand out as just being, man, that is a really nasty kind of thing?
Well, I mean, there are questions that come up in general supervisory topics where you take one of the basic FINRA supervision rules, which happens to be called 3110, which you'll learn a lot about in the Series 24. And there are many, many paragraphs and subparagraphs in those rules. And we just want to be sure students really know not just the highlight reel, but all the other subtopics within there, because ultimately they're going to have to make a choice on whether it's this subparagraph or the next subparagraph. So really being able to appreciate where those nuances go off in different directions, I think, is what really separates the winners from the losers on this test.
When I'm doing the practice exams and I've got a question and it's just, man, it is like killer detail. I'm supposed to memorize that it's a 7-day versus a 10-day. Is that something that I have to commit the hundreds of items like that to memory?
I think I get that question every single day from students. And my view there is the way the exam is structured these days, let's call it 10 to 15% of the test will require that if something is 7 business days or calendar days. But the other 85% of the test is really a much more conceptual exam. So I would rather you not spend all the hours memorizing what might be the phone book, because you'll get half those questions right and half those questions wrong. But if you've got the lion's share of the other broad topics, which are more conceptual themes, I think that's really how you want to position your best study hours for this test.
Right. One of the things that I sometimes talk about with my students is, anytime you get a question, it gives you the opportunity to not only think about what the right answer is, but to drill down if it's a broad topic and say, if this is a general supervision rule asking about custody or, trading rules or something like that, it's a high-level question. Make sure you can speak to the purpose and its rationale, and then also ask yourself, do I know the details, those peripheral points? Or, on the other hand, if you get that real granular question, how much time do you have to report an equity trade or something like that, you get to go up to say, do I know the 10,000-foot rule here?
Right.
And, I always talk to the students about, if you can do that back and forth. They gave me a detailed question, let me tell them the story up high.
Right.
Or they gave me a broad question, do I know some of the details? That becomes a very effective study tool to get the most value out of their questions.
Right. Yeah, I often recommend that, you don't want to get too lost in the details because then you lose sight of what the larger rules are about. But something else that I tend to emphasize with the students is that when you're doing a practice question and there are 4 choices, there's always going to be 1 right answer and 3 wrong answers. Do you understand why the 3 wrong answers are wrong? And if you could, how would you change one of the wrong answers to actually make it a correct answer?
Yeah, I love that approach.
So you force yourself to really learn something from data which wasn't even the focus of the question itself. So it had a much more resonant meaning for you when you're taking practice questions.
Right, exactly. Well, this has been super useful, and the insight on the 24 is always hard to come by, but it's
so many people, people in general, taking exams, other than public speaking, I think taking standardized exams is a frightful experience. But, if people have the right technique and the right coaching available, which is what Dave and I can provide, I think it's a big win. You just have to dive in and not be worried about it.
Some people even come out of it and say they enjoyed the process.
They do, and we enjoy being on the delivering end of it. So I think, again, for everybody's purposes, it's a triple win. Dave, myself, and you, the students.
See you in class soon.
Take care, guys.